Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Hey Drew, I need your help.
What's up, Simon?
Well, when it comes to collecting power stars, puzzle pieces and Pokemon, you're the man.
Oh, nice.
So, I have a new quest. Can you find air power?
Sorry, mate. Not even Apple knows where to find that.
Exactly. It is 2019 and we have seen or heard or read pretty much nothing about air power. I still think it does exist, but you're not going to get a sniff of it at all until it's actually ready to launch. Rumours are pointing to early 2019, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. Anyway, for those unfamiliar, I have Drew on this episode, and he is from the House of Mario, his first time on Apple Slice. So, hey Drew, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, Simon, for having me on the show. Looking forward to getting into what we're going to talk about tonight.
Cool. I did guest on the House of Mario episode, so anyone who does listen to that, you will already have heard our dastardly dynamic. But for people unfamiliar, what is the House of Mario?
So the House of Mario is a Nintendo podcast I do with my best mate Bryce, where we basically just talk about the latest Nintendo games, news, rumors, etc. And sometimes we go back and talk about old games and experiences from our childhood, like we did when you come on the show, Simon. Talked about some classic Nintendo 64 games and rare games.
Yes.
And yeah, we just have fun with it because we're super passionate about video games and especially Nintendo games. So yeah, we absolutely love talking about it every week.
Yeah, so you're pretty much the same kind of description, I guess, of what our podcast is, but the Nintendo version. Like essentially same type of thing. Like latest news, can talk about rumors, can review stuff, and we're basically just geeking out about it.
Yeah, so like really getting into a certain niche and talking to like a group of people that really feel passionate about the same thing.
Absolutely. So before we start, I want to give some quick Apple-ish questions, but to prepare, I have a beer in my hand. So can you guess which one?
I hope it's a Furphy. I hope you've gone with the...
Sorry to let you down. I've gone WA this time with Gage Roads, my trusty Gage Roads. I have I was having single fins yesterday while I was weeding, but today I'm on the Little Doves, bit more crafty, bit stronger. But
nice.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep the Furfies exclusively for if I appear on House of Mario.
Okay. I actually don't have a beer at all. I didn't even think about grabbing a beer tonight.
That's all right. I'll drink on your behalf.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so for these questions, how did you first get into Apple?
It was probably at the end of primary school with the iPad, the iPod Nano.
Yep.
I can't remember exactly what generation it was. It might be the third. It was the generation when it was a color screen and it didn't play video yet, and it came in the 2 gig variation, and I absolutely loved the thing. Yeah, I just remember really wanting one just because like I really got suckered in with the Apple marketing and the aesthetic and the packaging, like what Apple does really well.
Yes.
And I don't think I actually owned a normal MP3 player. I always had iPods because I really enjoyed them.
Yep.
From there, like I eventually got an iPhone, iPad, and I've just gone to the MacBook Pro now. Like I really enjoy my Apple products, and I've kept it going since then.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. So while you are definitely in that ecosystem and I know that you don't say update as often as I would, but looking back on 2018, do you have any sort of favorite product announcement or keynote or anything like that?
The one that definitely excited me the most was the update to the MacBook Pro.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so I bought one a couple of months, or was it? Yeah, a couple of months ago, doesn't matter exactly when. But when that got announced mid last year, I really looked at all the reviews and all that, and I think I looked at every single review on YouTube. I looked at so many reviews. I think it was like 2 weeks straight. The only thing I was looking at on YouTube was just like MacBook Pro this and checking out. Oh, is there an issue with the fan throttling and all that stuff? And then it turned out, oh, they updated it, so now there's not a problem. And so that's probably my favorite thing they announced last year, as well as the Apple Watch Series 4.
Yep.
I haven't got an Apple Watch at all, but it's one of those things I'm always looking at, going, I really want one, but just with buying a $4,000 laptop, I'm like, all right, you can't go spending your money on all these different things.
I suppose you'll get into Apple Watch when the time is right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, hopefully, we would expect, say, a Series 5 next September, so they might entice you then. But or even typically, you get a price drop on the previous generation, so you could get a Series 4 then.
Yeah. I'm the type of person though that can't. If a new one comes out, I can't go for the old one. Like I just know in the back of my head, and if I do buy the previous model, I know the new model is sitting there, just waiting. I'm like, oh.
This time round's been very interesting. So I'm part of this Apple Watch Facebook group, and there's all sorts of people that have been there since the start, people that are brand new, people being like, which option do I buy? And this time around has been the most time I've spent answering questions of, do I go Series 3 or 4? So, people are really because there is that price hike between those models anyway. And for a lot of people, Series 3 is actually a really good option because they're sort of not really concerned about the ECG stuff. And, they prefer the smaller screen and, say the new infographic watch face with more complications on it. They're like, oh, that's cool, but, I'd rather, spend a bit less and just, get what I really need to out of it. And people saying, do I go cellular or not? And so, yeah, it's it'd be interesting to see what they do this year for a expected Series 5. But I think the Series 3 has actually been doing pretty well this time around.
Yeah, it's definitely an appealing product, Series 3 still, but it's just whenever they update their new products, you always look back at the old one, and they always seem to make something that looks so cool at the time. Like, oh wow, it looks outdated now. I don't know how. It's just it's real. It must be real trickery or genius on their behalf. Just how much they can improve something that you didn't think needed improving, but they give you a reason why you might need to upgrade or go and buy the latest one.
Yeah, so particularly with Series 4 was the first time they had a big enough form factor change, so larger screen, the screen goes further to the edges, you got rounded corners, and as soon as I then looked at my wife's Series 1 38mm compared to my the larger of the Series 4, I was like, man, hers is so mini. It was just, I know exactly what you mean. I was just comparing it side by side. I was like, damn, I'm so glad I went with this. But it's just one of those things. This happens with technology, really.
Yeah.
So what do you expect, or what would you like to see from Apple this year?
I really hope they don't do a really big improvement on the MacBook Pro. That's what I really don't want to see. And there will be, so I'm not going to be. I knew there will be.
I'm going to put your mind at ease a little bit, and I don't think we're going to get that this year. I think at most you might get a spec bump with whatever latest Intel is available, but the next time they do a proper kind of refresh of the MacBook Pro line, I feel is when they're going to replace Intel with their own chips, and they're going to incorporate the True Depth camera into the screen for Face ID, and they'll be thinner bezels, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I actually think that what you have now is pretty much going to be that until they can do I'm thinking 2020 at the earliest. So you're still good for a while.
I've spent money on expensive computers before, but this one was ooh, it was pushing it. But I having it. Absolutely love the thing. Sorry, going back to your question. There's nothing I'm really expecting next year. I'm not really looking to upgrade anything I've got at the moment. I'm always interested to see what they're coming out.
What do you reckon about you've got a 7? So do you reckon you'd be in the market to? Are you going fine with that, or do you think you can see yourself upgrading in a year or a couple of years?
Yeah, I think I'll be fine this year. I think maybe next year I'll see what's going on, how I'm going with the phone. Because at the moment it's just social media, phone calls, podcasts. Like, I don't really need to upgrade. The only thing that really might get me excited to like really push would be the camera.
Yep.
But even then, like the camera on the iPhone 7 is still a pretty decent camera. It's not it's not going back to the iPhone 5 or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love the look of the iPhone 10, and I'm always looking at it going, oh, that looks nice, but save the cash.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess you've just splashed out on that MacBook Pro, so
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so you're going good with all that. Now, speaking of things that people perceive as not going so well, is Apple. Apparently, they're doomed again for the 35th time this year. So,
Okay.
Tim Cook has, in a very rare move, has issued a letter to investors before their expected earnings report. So each quarter they do an earnings report. They go, this is how much Apple sold. This is how much they made out of it. This is how many iPhones were sold, and all that sort of stuff. And, particularly once they had surpassed that $1 trillion market cap, it's been very, it's been this constant battle between them and like, okay, Google are going to overtake them as Amazon and Microsoft's there and all this other stuff. And at the end of the day, it's like, come on, man, they're all major tech companies. They're all doing really well. Does it really matter? But some of these investors just go crazy over this stuff. They're like, oh, stock prices, it's crashing. Apple's going to go under. I'm like, they were the first $1 trillion company. I mean, come on, they're not going to go under anytime soon.
No, I don't think. Especially with all their services and that, like even if they get rid of their hardware, they're fine for at least like a little while yet.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the crux of where they're going anyways, is the growth will be through services, right? So what actually happened was that the Apple shares were halted, and then he issued this letter, and the last time Apple ever issued a letter to investors apparently was 2002, so it's been some time.
Right.
And so what the letter said is previously they told investors, okay, expect at the next earnings report that we will have achieved between 89 and 93 billion for that quarter. Now they've said, okay, we have to lower that estimate to 84 billion. So a drop of just a handful of billion. What's a few billion between friends, really?
Yeah, really.
They said operating expenses would be the same. There was an additional expenses increased from 300 to 550 million, and the same tax rate. So yeah, the main thing was that drop in the adjusting the forecast essentially. So Tim Cook put this down to a few different factors. He said one is the timing of the iPhone launches. So basically, if you're comparing to the year before, the iPhone 10 when that came out, because it was delayed, that sort of the sales of that primarily filled the quarter one of 2018, whereas this time round, 10S and 10S Max were on time, at the start of the quarter in September, and so a lot of their sales were during the fourth quarter. Now, he said that because they introduced multiple new products, there was definitely a big constraint on supply. So this particularly affected the Series 4, the iPad Pro, the MacBook Air, and even AirPods, which just continue to sell out. One of the biggest ones, which is obviously all over the news in the past month or so, is everything to do with trade tariffs. So the trade tensions between China and the US particularly. So with this, obviously between China and America, they're both disputing, setting tariffs on certain goods traded between each other. And so there's this real trade war per se that's been going on. Now, this sort of uncertainty has reached the public in China. So Apple have even said that there's been a big decline in traffic to actual Apple stores and even the resellers. And they also stated the overall smartphone market in China is contracting anyway, and basically that they can't change any of these macroeconomic conditions, which is a new word I didn't know about. So yeah. I feel smarter knowing the word macroeconomic. And in addition to this, this next point is interesting, right? So Tim Cook basically said, so there was the whole thing with the battery speed throttling thing, right? Like with iPhones, that basically it was if your battery essentially had deteriorated to a point where it needs replacing, then they're essentially slowing the system down to help to help save your device. But the issue at the time was that they didn't tell people they were doing that, and so there was that big theory of Apple are purposely slowing down my phone so I will
do remember
upgrade.
that, yeah.
And then that all, came out in the open as, okay, this is what we're doing and why. So it was their bad that they didn't explain it beforehand. But anyway, that led to the reduced cost of the battery replacement program. So they dropped it right down to like pretty much near cost price. And so there was just like lines and lines of Genius Bar appointments to get your people replacing their batteries in their 6S and their 7 and stuff like that. So by doing that then essentially, they got the battery replaced and their phone it's almost like it's brand new again. And so it's kind of weird. So it's like you got the theory of people saying they're forcing me to upgrade by slowing it down, and then you got Apple offering the cheaper battery thing, and then Tim Cook sort of saying like, well, because we offered the cheaper battery thing, people held onto their device and didn't upgrade. Taking all of that into account, as just you and I as consumers, should we even care about this? Like, should people? We are not investors. Does it even matter to us that their stock prices has dropped down? Like, it's all over definitely all over the tech news, and it's hit other headlines, and just at the end of the day, they're still going to continue making good, reliable products. So, like
you said, at the end of the day, we're still going to get great products from them, and also they're making less money, but they're still making an unfathomable amount of money. They're not going to go under anytime soon. If they just sat there with the money they had now, they'll still be able to keep operating for years and years. So I don't think it will really impact us as consumers that much. Well, what do you think?
I think, yes, it doesn't impact consumers unless you're one of those people that are falling victim of the very clickbait headlines. So this type of stuff, I feel like is absolute gold for those like news sites and tech news sites that love the whole like Apple is doomed, and then they get the click and they get the advertising revenue out of it and stuff. And it's been going on for ages. It just happens to be that this time round, when people say, oh, things are going bad for Apple, there actually was some legitimacy to it. It's like, okay, yes, there is a drop in the performance forecast now, but typically people say, I remember when iPhone 10 came out, iPhone 10 is like, it's terrible, Apple have to scrap it, it's not selling, and it was the highest selling smartphone in the world. Like, it's ridiculous. So typically, like, people such as myself would be like, okay, it's a boy who cried wolf situation with these reports that go around. But yeah, this time it turned out there was some truth to it. So I just if you're one of those people that will like read an article or just read a headline and think, oh man, I need to bail on Apple and go elsewhere because they're going to go under, then I think you've got a few more problems other than just switching phone, like if you're just taking headlines for what they are. Yeah,
because like a lot of these places, they're always looking to attack the big guys and try and get in the get in the clicks however they can. This isn't just exclusive to Apple, but it's other companies, it's people on YouTube, it's everywhere, and it's frustrating to watch because like you can't sort that out from like the real thing. So if there is a real problem with an Apple product, you don't know if it's just someone, trying to attack them saying, oh, look, my iPhone's bending, when it's just like one in a million of the devices what comes out of the factory, or it's actually a real issue with the product and you should have to stay away with it. You don't know. Yeah, it's unfortunately just something that we have to live with in this generation, where physical papers and physical magazines and stuff are just, so many people shifting away from print anyway, and with everything being web-based and everything being, the revenue being ads-based, you're just going to get a lot of these clickbaity style things, and it's just up to you as to whether you're smart enough to actually read into it and try and verify things, which is, you could argue that sort of stuff has happened with newspapers and stuff anyway. People have a certain agenda, but they definitely do.
This is just like, this is just like hardcore, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same with YouTube channels. It's, like you can, like you and I, can pick apart the legitimate ones versus the people that are just trying to make cash. But yeah. Lastly, this has also started the people getting themselves worked up and saying Tim Cook should be fired.
Oh God!
And I'm like, okay, so there's always the thing of people like, this wouldn't happen if Steve Jobs was still around, which and Nick has always said, on this podcast, we're just like, okay, this is just ridiculous. It's like, okay, yep, they are two different people. But did you actually know that before Steve Jobs died, he told Tim Cook not to try and be him? Like, lead Apple with his own vision, be his own person. And that's great. And that's what he has been doing. Under Tim Cook, particularly over the past couple of years, Apple have made great choices with the refocus on the Pro market, got more Pro products coming out this year with Mac Pro and everything. They introduced like huge hit products like AirPods. They're like smashing it in the watch space and the tablet space. They continue to push incredible chip architecture, which is definitely one of their strong points. And while, yes, the price hikes are a bit hard to take, and you could argue whether some things are worth it or not. The thing is that it's setting pricing standards. So there used to be the argument of iPhones are so expensive, but a XS versus a Galaxy S9 versus a Pixel 3 are all very similarly priced. Like, it's just like that's just become the standard of those top-end smartphones. So, yeah, okay, yes, it's a lot of money, but it's sort of like the entire industry is shifting that way anyway. It's not an Apple exclusive thing. So I don't care if they're number one in terms of making the most money or the first trillion, or whether they drop up and down above a trillion below. I'm happy enough with where they're going. I do think there's some areas that lapsed along the way. Particularly in the Mac space, but they're definitely bringing a refocus there. And I think in terms of, lastly, in terms of like an area of the market that they could go back and readdress is an update to something, say, like the iPhone SE. So I think something like that smaller, lower end, cheaper iPhone is definitely going to do really well, not just for people that prefer that size, but for those they've particularly had a lot of struggles in, say, selling within India because of just the affordability of it. And so something like an SE2 could go really well over there.
I definitely feel like they need a phone which is that pricing option, which is a bit cheaper, rather than having to go, I want an Apple product. I want access to Apple Podcasts, the App Store, Apple Music, all those things, but don't necessarily need a big, awesome phone.
Yes.
They might just want a cheaper phone.
Yeah.
And even their cheaper option, like say they do bring out a new SE, what would they price it at? Probably would it be 800 Australian? Like if they're really trying to make it affordable, which is still a pretty expensive piece of hardware to go out and buy.
I forget what the current one is priced at, but I think if they can update it like spec bump, like they could easily keep the same form factor and just do the spec bump thing, and that would still sell well. Like, I don't, as much as it'd be cool to see an SE size thing with like thin bezels and Face ID and all that other stuff, I just think for the people that will use that device, they're not really concerned with that. So yeah, we'll just wait and see. The whole SE2 thing has been floating around for nearly 2 years now as a rumor, so I had kind of given up on it, but I hold out hope just for that market. It'll be a quiet release. Yeah.
I guess the argument against that is just if you want a cheaper iPhone, you can go and get the 6 or the 7.
iPhones in general are lasting longer and longer anyway.
Yeah.
So there are a few options, but yeah, it would be good if they can. Yeah.
Go to Australia Post and get your cheap iPhone.
All right. Well, speaking of Australia, I'm going to switch over to Deal Down Under, and this is where you take the reins, because I want to talk about gaming. You're obviously very passionate about gaming, Nintendo and other platforms as well. And so with House of Mario, you went to AvCon, which is an Adelaide thing, and you went to PAX in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when you were there, particularly listening to your episodes, you got to play different games, speak to different developers, particularly like Australian or like indie game developers. So from your time there, or if you've been keeping up to date with it, are there any sort of recent or upcoming releases for iOS that you saw at your time there, or even like, say, Steam on Mac and that sort of thing?
Not so much iOS. There were a couple of games there that were running on iOS. Oh, actually, there was one game there that was running on Android, but I want to talk about 2 games that are available on Mac via Steam. One is Hollow Knight, which is available on Steam, and it's made by an Adelaide developer called Team Cherry, and it's sort of like you'll describe it as a Metroidvania game, which is for the non-gamers out there. It's basically a 2D game where you're exploring the environment and you're learning abilities, and you can go back and unlock areas in previous areas that you currently couldn't have access to. And it's a huge game, and I think it's only like, it's really cheap. It's only, I think, $18 Australian. I'm not sure what they charge on Steam because it was American, then the prices have changed.
Okay.
The prices have changed since then. But that's definitely a great one to pick up. And one of my favorite games last year, which I played on Switch, but I've also got it on Steam, which is Dead Cells.
I heard you mention that several times. Yeah.
Have you seen anything on this? Dead
No,
Cells?
not yet. But please refresh my memory.
So it's another game where it's a 2D game, and it's randomly generated. So every area you go to, it's always different. And once you die, you go back to the start. But as you go on runs basically. So you've got to try and get as far as you go on one run, and on that run, you get abilities and experience which you put into your character, which you always keep. So each run you do, theoretically, you should make it easier to get further each time. And it's really hard. It's really beautiful with its art style, and yeah, it was definitely a game that surprised me last year because I heard about it. I'm like, oh, it looks good, but once you actually get your hands on it and get to play, like really get into the combat, and once you die, you're just automatically like, oh, I've got to go back and have another go. You've got to try and get further, try and beat the bosses. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm just treating it as like a high school game. I've got no interest in trying to beat it necessarily. It will happen eventually if I just throughout the years if I keep playing it, because it is super hard. Like this is a game you've got to like sit down and actually like really play and get good at, because it will kick your ass. It's kicked my ass multiple times.
So it's less of that casual gamer approach like you would typically have on iOS, and it's more of a
Yes, definitely. Yep.
It is interesting that you mentioned about art style, because that's definitely something that I'm drawn to. I obviously covered that with the Rare games and stuff on 64. It was always like charming, unique art style that I really get into, and so that's where I've found I've barely played games on Mac, but obviously I've definitely played a whole different types of games on my iPhone and iPad, and it's always the ones that are more of like, I would happily pay for an app if the visuals just have something about it that is compelling.
Yeah.
It doesn't exactly have to be any particular genre, but they sort of end up being either like some form of like puzzler or storytelling type of game. So stuff like that I really appreciate. Yeah, and that kind of like leads me to the next part of this is so traditional games publishers, your Nintendo obviously and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
How have you felt that they've had to adapt to obviously this rise in popularity of smartphones and tablets for gaming?
Nintendo is such a funny one. For years and years and years, they said we'll never put our characters and IP on smart devices. They were very adamant about it. They said they'll never do it. They said it will weaken the brand as such. And that's why it was such a big surprise to see Miyamoto come out on the Apple
Super Mario Run.
Yeah, on the Apple stage to reveal Super Mario Run.
I was so happy at that keynote. Like, I was literally like high school excitement.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. And I guess it was the Wii U that really, I don't know if it pushed their hand, or I dare say it pushed their hand. They had to think about other markets to sort of get to, because that console was failing. It's only sold, was it 13 point something million, and the Switch is already it's going to double it pretty soon.
Yeah.
Like it was a very weak console, like in just its idea and the way they executed it, and people just didn't want it and they couldn't sell it. So they had to look for other markets to sort of think about putting their games. So if their next console, which was the Switch, didn't succeed, they had maybe the smartphone or the 3DS or whatever markets to still keep making money. And I really appreciate the way they sort of look at the smartphone market. They don't say, okay, we're going to put Super Mario Bros. From the Nintendo Entertainment System on the iPhone and you can just play it with fake buttons. They said, we'll never port the games, but the games on the iPhone and Android devices are supplements to their console games.
Yeah.
So with Super Mario Run, they put like a proper Mario game, which was built for a smart device, which you didn't need any buttons. You could play with one hand, and you pay the one price, which was, I think it was about $16 here in Australia. Yeah. So you can,
and that's where a lot of, like, I was perfectly happy paying that, but that's where a lot of people, you had the first level free, and then everyone's just like, oh, I'm paying that much, because people have it in their head, unfortunately, that that app games, that's phone games, shouldn't cost any more than $5.
And that's a shame too, because I feel like you could have some great experiences if devs knew they could put the time into a game and charge $5 and get their money back, put into the next game and make another amazing game. But
exactly.
But like so many games on the marketplace are just designed to be like, okay, how can we keep players in, keep spending money so we can keep the company afloat? They don't actually, I feel like unfortunately the App Store for game development has sort of, is hindered in that way. And even Nintendo, after Super Mario Run, I think it sold like, I think like so many people downloaded it but didn't actually buy it.
Yes, yeah, that was it. It was like a huge amount downloaded, but obviously that paywall was...
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, I didn't buy Super Mario Run either, but that's because you couldn't play it offline because of the DRM.
Yes.
So you couldn't pirate it. And I lived out of town at the time on a farm, and I didn't have service most of the time. So I wouldn't have been able to play the game unless I was at home in the house, where I could be playing. If I want to play a video game, I'd probably go and play the PlayStation or my Nintendo console rather than just sit there on my phone. So unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. But every other game they've released after has been a free to play with microtransactions because of Super Mario Run and its non-success. Even though it still sold millions, but
just not to the level that, I mean, I definitely paid for it. I completed it. I went back and, collected all the different colored star coins, the ones that are high difficulty, and I definitely got my money's worth out of it. I think the control, the whole thing of it being a constant runner and then having to back bounce off of walls to go backwards and stuff, or that dynamic I think was cool.
Yeah, that was good.
Because you're constantly running. It's sort of like you sort of flip upstairs rather than actually just like jumping up a stair. So that kind of felt a little bit weird at first, but like visually I reckon it looked great and all that sort of stuff. I just think, yes, the two things, like even with that paywall, that definitely was like for the game itself. That was definitely like the peak that they could have charged for it, I think. But
definitely.
I would have loved for them to add more levels and stuff to it, but they said they weren't going to do that.
They did actually they supported it for a fair while, like the year after they added modes and.
But if they were able to do the offline, and if they were to do a true one-on-one versing your friend rather than versing their ghost performance or whatever. That would have been great, because that's really what I wanted to do. Like I was versing people from around the world, but I wasn't actually versing them at that time. It was more just like a run of that level that they just did. So yeah, I'm hoping that doesn't, in terms of Mario games, that doesn't kind of ruin their wants to do it. But that being said, they did announce. It's probably even a year and a half ago when I mentioned that there's a Zelda game coming for iOS.
Yes.
So I'm really interested to see what that's going to be.
Mine too.
What style they're going to go with and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and there's a Mario Kart game coming this year too sometime, which is...
I'm hoping that WWDC or something, or even the September event, we get a preview of either of those.
Yeah, it's called Mario Kart World Tour, so it'd be interesting. And I think the wording they used was application. So whether an application is still a playable game, or it's something where you can just look at a track, I don't know. I got no idea what it's going to be, but I can't see it just being it's Mario Kart on a phone necessarily. I think they're gonna have some spin on it.
Yeah.
Did you play the first Nintendo? It's not a game, but it's like an application, Metamo. Yeah, how weird was that?
It was kind of strange, yeah.
and-
See, I totally think, like, just on a little side note, they could totally put like WarioWare or something.
Yes.
On mobile. Yeah,
Yes.
all the mini games.
WarioWare would be absolutely perfect. It's like just heaps of micro games. You just play one after another.
Yep,
and
definitely.
They brought one out on the 3DS this year, and it was great too. But it was on 3DS, so a lot of people didn't pay that much attention to it. But yeah, WarioWare's always been a fantastic one. Animal Crossing, which they did put onto smartphone.
Yes. Yep.
For me personally, it leaves a bit to be desired. They sort of went a bit too much in the like
casual kind of.
Yeah, well, Animal Crossing is casual. I've got nothing against a bit of casual Animal Crossing playing, hardcore Animal Crossing player. But I think they went a bit too much and like, oh, you've got to pay for this and you've got to wait for this and
yeah.
Like if it was Animal Crossing like it was on the 3DS or the DS systems, I think that would have been awesome. But yeah,
I think my only letdown with Super Mario Run was that the bosses were too easy. That's sort of my only gripe. But I feel like that it's sort of like they did the presentation, they had a good launch with it, they then brought it to Android afterwards, and it's just like, I think they would have learnt some lessons from it, and I really hope that this can kind of like mean that they can come out with another Mario game that's a bit more fully fledged, a bit more thought out. Because something like Super Mario Maker, I reckon, could be great, like creating the courses like with your smartphone and stuff.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I don't know how it would work, but it'll be neat. Yeah.
At least on like an iPad size screen anyway, it could be pretty cool. But,
yeah, that'd be awesome. Oh, yeah, on the new iPad Pro. Yeah, looks sick. Then you just put it on your TV anyway with the...
Speaking of, you just mentioned iPad Pro, obviously when they did the keynote for that, and they're talking about how powerful it is, they said has Xbox One S level graphics, which I did see some gamers got a little bit up in arms about it. They're like, what are Apple saying? Like, what, like they come out with these statements. It's like, okay, performance, like graphical performance wise, sure, like, the stuff they showed and that seemed to definitely demonstrate that type of thing, but I think it's more people getting worked up because they're like, playing on an iPad is nothing like playing with a Xbox console. So this is my final part, is like the perception that gamers or hardcore gamers have of mobile games, because generally they're kind of thumbs down it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where does it sit with you? I know you've said that you had some fun with some of Nintendo's offerings, but do a lot of them just perceive it as like, Candy Crush cities? You know what I mean? Like that the mobile's made just for quick short games like that, or
I think some do, but I think most of us know that there are good games on smart devices. Like personally, I don't play many games at all on my phone. My phone is, used for everyday things. I don't.
Yes.
When I sit down and I want to play something, it's usually on a different device. But there are definitely games that, if they are made for a touchscreen, are fantastic on them. What I have a problem with is, say, like what Square Enix do with a lot of their games. They just port old games, maybe from the Super Nintendo or whatever it might be, to the iPhone, and like you've got,
it doesn't translate.
Yeah, you've got to use like a controller controls on a touchscreen. They just don't work.
Yeah.
And also what I said about before, just developers having to sort of can't put a price on their game. They've got to implement microtransactions, and that's where a lot of the stigma comes from, I guess. But like looking at them now, like the iPad Pro and like the new iPhone and that, like they're really powerful pieces of technology. They got awesome graphics. If the touch interface and that's implemented in the games well, like there's no reason they can't be a great gaming platform. But
yeah, so like the thing is with iPad Pro, right, and with people that obviously use the controllers, you can get Bluetooth controllers, and I really feel like that this is a space where if Apple want to push the gaming side of stuff, particularly with the power of iPad Pro, they should just release their own Bluetooth controller.
I wish they did. I wish they did, to be honest. I
like air control or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like when I bought my iPad Air, back then I used to carry it around everywhere because I didn't have an iPhone then, and that used to be like my podcast listening machine, and
Yeah, right.
Everything, this big iPad, just used to carry around everywhere. And I used to think, how awesome would it be if I could stand this up, get out a controller, and just play a game? Because it had the graphics, it had everything it needed inside of it. It just needed a way to be able to interface with the games how I want. Like, obviously, there's a lot of games which, like, you're touching it, and that's great. But some games, there might be some driving games where I don't want to be moving the actual unit
the tilting.
itself.
Yeah.
Not so much into that. And that's why when Nintendo announced the Switch, I was so excited. It's what I wanted. It's 100% what I wanted. I've got the controller.
Yeah, detachable controller. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so in some ways, I wish Apple would do that.
Okay, so with iPad Pro being pro device, and obviously they're talking about pro applications and stuff, I didn't expect them to even cover games, but the fact they did, and with those sort of like statements talking about, comparison to Xbox One S, I'm like, surely this could be the start of something. This could be the start of like a change into, hey, not only is this now going to come with pro-level Photoshop and all these other pro-level apps that are going to be coming in the future, but hey, this could become your powerful portable gaming device. And just an Apple controller, I think, would be fantastic. I think I need to mock one up. I think this requires a mock-up.
I actually don't think it means anything, to be honest. I think it's just like, all right, what's a product out there we can compare this to which consumers are aware of? They're not going to say, okay, it's this PC configuration. People aren't going to understand that.
Yeah.
And they're not going to.
Yeah, that's fair.
They're not going to point towards, it's the same power as this other Samsung thing.
Yeah, they needed just a point of reference in the gaming world, and they use Xbox. Yeah,
and they're pointing at Xbox because they couldn't give a shit if you go out and buy an Xbox, because they're not they're not fighting for that space at all. So.
Okay, my last part on this is obviously Apple with ARKit and ARKit 2 are really pushing augmented reality. A lot of the demos they do involve iPads, especially. Whether it's something that's like educational or presentational, or it's actually a game. And the stuff they've shown, I think, is quite impressive. But I still think people in itself are just getting used to the idea of actually walking around with their devices for something like AR. So, do you have any AR versus VR? Do you have any strong feelings either way?
I've barely really used any, to be honest. VR, I've only been able to use the Oculus once, and that was on like a treadmill thing where you're running around with this fake gun. But no, I haven't been exposed to it. I've only been watching, sitting on YouTube watching people play around.
People play Beat Saber and stuff.
Yeah, Beat Saber on on the VR devices looks awesome. I really want to actually get one for that. But yeah, as far as the Apple side of things goes, I've only been watching this sort of stuff on YouTube, and people have been doing it. It looks really cool. I've lied. The 3DS actually has AR.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
That's obviously years ago, and the 3DS has awful cameras, but it's fun to muck around with and seeing what Apple's doing, and it's actually got the chipset and all that to really push it. It could be really interesting. What are some really cool uses of it which you've noticed?
Okay, so my main thing is, games-wise, there was this cool, Thomas the Tank Engine track builder thing I showed my son, and it was cool, you use the camera to detect the surface of the table or the floor, and then you built the track, and then you...
Oh my God.
Then you viewed the whole thing through the phone, and he's the train's going all around and doing jumps and stuff, and...
I would have loved that as a kid, oh my God.
Yes, the only unfortunate thing is it was cool, but it was a battery drainer. So that's kind of where the tweaking is coming into it, is those figuring out how to push something that looks impressive but isn't going to kill your battery. So.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So games-wise, that was something. There is that Jurassic World one that's out now. I haven't tried that yet. I really should, because I'm a huge fan of dinosaurs, but that's where you can actually set the dinosaur in your environment and that sort of thing. But my main thing that I'm really keen for is the whole I've mentioned on the podcast before, is the whole building 3D models, and then you can load it through the phone. And I said I really want to use it for work. So we build these machinery attachments, and I want to be able to load it up on an iPad, and then you could either have someone, download it through like an app that we would offer, or you could actually show them in terms of like, okay, yeah, you park your machine here, and this is what this attachment will look like, on your machine, and this is how the mounts line up and all that sort of stuff. So it has a lot of potential in that area. So it really covers a wide range of applications. There was that demo they showed at the keynote with AR, with counting the basketballs going through the hoop, and that looked really cool as well. So I think we're sort of scratching the surface of it. Apple are really pushing that, but ultimately it feels like it's leading up to AR glasses, like Apple AR glasses, because that's going to be the best way to really embrace it without having to hold something like the weight of a tablet in your arms for too long.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Also, just looking through like this window as well. Like you're holding the iPad up like a window, and you're like looking through it. Whereas if you have something like glasses or something
right in front of your eyes, yeah,
it's just like you're looking around like you usually would. Yeah.
Okay,
awesome.
So speaking of future tech, we have a handful of patents that have been either applied for or granted that Apple have done. So a first one called Smart Fabric. So basically they were granted a patent for a smart fabric. And this, the reference image, it basically is similar to nanomaterials where actual OLED is embedded within the fabric. So it'd almost be like an actual display on your clothing, on your sleeve, on your band or whatever. And I could totally see watch bands being the first accessory that they do to utilize this. Just being able to like look on the underside of your watch band and it giving you some like status symbols and that sort of stuff. So yeah, just because they register a patent doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just kind of like a cover any ideas, while you come up with them.
Yeah, it's the same in the gaming world too. You're seeing all these different patents coming out. There was one for a PlayStation 4 controller which like rips in half and it becomes the virtual reality controllers.
Yeah, right.
Stuff like that. And Nintendo's got a lot of great ones too, which you're like, all right, fair enough as well.
Yeah, exactly. So another one is a biometric sensor for the watch. So right now, to unlock your watch, if you've got a passcode on, you have to put the passcode in. There's no camera on the watch. It can't do Face ID. There's no fingerprint sensor or anything. So they're talking about a sensor built into the band where it actually recognizes your skin texture on your wrist. So it's like a Touch ID, but a section of your skin on your wrist that unlocks it instead. Which is, it's sort of like, it'll only unlock if you put it on sort of thing, which seems pretty crazy.
Yeah, it'd be interesting how they make that work. Like, sort of, what bit on your wrist would be unique enough to like, make it so it doesn't unlock? I've got no idea. I've never looked into wrist fingerprints or whatever. Yeah, wrist prints,
wrist textures. Yeah, it's gonna be called wrist ID, I reckon, or something like that.
I'm gonna check out my wrist texture from now on, I reckon. See what's
going on. Okay, so this one sort of came out of nowhere, and that's Apple's version of Uber or Lyft. So it would basically use your Apple account payment method and information, so it's automatically built, all that's already set up. It'd be built into Apple Maps, which is currently being rebuilt, and I did cover this several episodes ago, so they've rebuilding it from the ground up using all their own vehicles, all their own cameras, all their own data and everything rather than any third-party stuff. It looks very promising, but obviously that sort of stuff is going to require a lot of time. They did start in San Francisco, and apparently like America's going to be completed within a year. So, I don't even know how long until we'd see the Maps update in Australia, let alone a dedicated Apple taxi sharing, ride sharing style service.
Is that the same sort of idea as Uber, where you're just random people can sign up and start driving?
I would assume so, for because when you're in America, when I went over, you had cars that had both the Uber and Lyft sticker icons on it, they could be either. So I'd imagine there'd be another one with like an Apple logo on it. So yeah, that's. Hey, whatever, like, that's cool, that makes sense, it'd be handy for me, I use maps and everything. So, that being said, with the whole map construction and that, I wouldn't imagine we'd see anything like this for probably at least 5 years over here.
5 years, you reckon? You mean like 10 years before it reaches Australia?
Well, 10 years and then our NBN might actually be world-class standard. So
Oh, who knows? I don't know about that, yeah.
Okay, this last one is going to pique your interest, and that is a multiplayer gaming system. So this one's interesting. So they patented plans for an online space for multiplayer games. So this actually ties to a previous patent of Apple gaming hardware, and by that I mean an all-screen controller. So that was kind of interesting in itself. So I think they're just covering bases here. I don't think it's going to come to fruition in the sense that because the iOS gaming platform is so big and because you use your device already, and that is such a huge growth area for them. Like they just had record revenue through the games part of the App Store this last quarter. So that being said, like, yeah, if I don't know, how do you feel? Do you think they would bother venturing into that, or just do you think the iOS gaming platform is where the focus will be?
I know, like I've noticed on like the MacBook, they've upgraded the App Store on there, and they're really trying to push some bigger games on there. I noticed like there's Tomb Raider, and like some bigger games on there, which I was actually pretty surprised to see on there. So yeah, maybe I'm not too sure because like as I said before, Apple, they don't seem that like they're one of the biggest players in the gaming industry, and they didn't even try. They just fell into it, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if they'll push for it, but I mean, I'm keen to see if they can sort of push into it. Yeah, maybe they're too afraid after the what was it called? The PIP? What was it called? The gaming console? Was it? It was called like a PIP or something. I forgot what it was called now. After
from years ago, you mean?
Yeah, years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it would seem like too much of a sidetrack at this point, but I think the fact that there is a patent involving a controller, that kind of gets me excited. So just bring out a controller and I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, because I don't know why they don't just have like a controller instead of relying on the third parties.
Because the thing is, they tried to push the Apple TV as like a gaming platform because you can use the TV remote as a controller, but
yeah.
I'm totally happy with the TV remote, but it is very thin and light. And I did play stuff like Rayman and that Rayman Origins on there and stuff, and it was kind of difficult to play with, like swiping with the touch sensitive part of it. When I got my my Apple TV is now a generation old, but when I first got it, I was like putting all these games onto it and I was having fun. Put Asphalt 8 onto there, that was cool. But I was just like instantly, I was like, okay, I really should just pair a Bluetooth controller to this because that can work with some games. So just if Apple just had their own, and it has one of the W2 chips or whatever in it, automatic iCloud pairing, you're ready to go.
Yeah,
nice like white or black with gloss section sort of finish. Could totally picture that happening. All right. Well, the last part for the game side of things, as we move into the appetizer section, and that's a very heartwarming game called Florence. So this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier. It's like a storytelling game. So it's an interactive story about love and life, essentially, and it's from a Melbourne craft game studio called Mountains. And one of the chief designers of this, Ken Wong, he's actually was one of the main designers for Monument Valley, also an award-winning game. I also really love both versions of Monument Valley. So this actually launched on Valentine's Day in 2018. So it's been a while. I had heard of it, but it wasn't until a friend mentioned it to me recently. I was like, I really should check this out. And so what it has won is actually the best mobile game at the Game Awards in 2018 and got a host of other nominations. So it is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So with this, just to give a bit of background, you play as this young woman called Florence, hence the title, and you're sort of going through your life and you got a desk job and you got this like mum that nags you and all the normal stuff. And sort of without giving it away, you essentially meet someone and it plays through all the different stages of like meeting your first love. So before I kind of break down into different segments of the game, what was your overall feeling about this?
I bought this back the start of last year, and I actually just played it today. I'm like, all right, I just never got around to it. It was like
what a coincidence.
yes, what a coincidence. I love how you sort of it. This is what I love about games too. Like it makes you feel what the characters are feeling through what's happening in the actual gameplay. Like you could
Yes.
just be swiping through and just reading a comic or whatever and watching it, and that's sad. But there's a certain section where they're on their first date and they're talking amongst one another, and you're putting together the speech bubbles. And at first, you're putting together these sort of complicated puzzles together, like puzzle pieces together. And there's lots of puzzle pieces. And as they're getting to know each other and really like the conversations are becoming easier for them to process, there's like less pieces. And as the conversation goes on, it becomes a lot easier to put it together. And that sort of like represents how they're getting to know each other and things are becoming more natural for them. And the game does a lot of that too. Sort of like you've got a clock and you rewind it and you're seeing what's happening to the characters as you're going through time, and it really puts into perspective maybe what's going on in your life, or if you're wasting too much time, or if you're not spending enough time with the ones you love. It really put in perspective a few things for me, which I wasn't expecting from a $5 game on the App Store on my phone. It really impressed me, yeah.
It just really nails that thing of, like, as you said, making you feel a certain way, using the different levels of difficulty to reflect, actual real life interactions, using even just like the selection of color and everything. It's just is a really well thought out part of it. It's like there's 10 different things sort of going on at once, and that's what I think is really good for the replayability of this, because it's actually like a pretty short game, right? And I want to go back and play, because you can go back and play certain chapters. It's broken up into chapters, and I just want to go back and play certain bits just to look for details I might have missed, because at the start I just wanted to play through and just complete the game, right? And I had such a good experience with it. I certainly think it has that sort of like just the inquisitive nature, like in myself, to be like, okay, yeah, I just want to see what they did in this section and that sort of stuff. And just to kind of, I guess, review this better, I've broken down a few categories. So the visuals, it definitely has this awesome hand-drawn style, has these soft colors, a good use of like warm and cool tones. And the animation is very interesting. It sort of uses that like subtle fades and like minimal frame sort of animation, and there's sliding elements and floating elements. So it definitely kind of has that storytelling vibe of, like you're reading through an illustrated book or reading a comic or something. And just the way that they use changes in shapes and everything to suit the scene, particularly the bit where they're arguing, and then like you're putting together the speech bubbles again, and everything is like jagged pieces, and it's odd, and it's just, I was like, well, this is really cool, and it's getting faster and faster and faster, and you're like, yeah, it was just a real, it really reflected like the tensions in an argument, and this is like their first argument, right? And yeah, I thought just a real multifaceted approach, I think.
It's something we can all relate to too. We can all relate to, fighting with a loved one, or getting to work and it's being mundane and you're sick of it, or, your parents are nagging you. Like, it's something we can all relate to, and I think they really nailed the feeling of it. And it's, especially since we're actually sitting there doing the action, like it would have been quite hard to sort of, all right, how can we convey, the fact that this conversation is getting easier, or the fact that this fight is getting more intense and it's escalating. I think they've done it really well for what appears to be a pretty simple game.
So paired with that, which you can actually listen to by itself, is the score, and this is where I think it really brings the whole game to life. So they definitely prompt you to use headphones, which I would agree with as well. And so essentially, like, the score, just along with the story, it just really kind of flows between like light and gentle and sad and urgent and frustrated, and it is like, yeah, it's essentially like a good movie score as well. Like the sounds you hear and the music makes you really evokes or amplifies the emotions that you're seeing. And that part of it, I just, hats off to the guy who did that.
There was a section there where I looked up for a second and went, holy crap, like, whew. Like, I got just like a big weight off my chest. I'm like, holy shit, like, just the music really pushes that.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Definitely, like, I think that's why I took so long to play this game. Because, like, when I'm on my phone or whatever, like, I'm, scrolling through social media, or someone's there, or Like, you've really got to play this somewhere where you can block out distractions.
And that's what I did. Like, I went and actually sat in my room and played most of it because I really wanted to concentrate.
And the problem is with blocking out distractions, your phone is probably the biggest distraction you've got in your life.
Yeah.
You've always got phone calls or messages or social media or whatever it might be popping up. So you've got to like maybe put it in airplane mode and just sit in a dark room with headphones on, which is a I guess a weird way to sort of play a game on your phone, but I definitely recommend it for that. I think it's worth it. I think another thing to sort of point out is that the games, it'll only take you about probably half an hour to 40 minutes to finish. Like, it's a really short game. It won't take up too much of your day or anything. So yeah, it's definitely worth the look at.
The little side note with that score, you can actually it's available as a playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. So just search Florence game, I think, and then you'll be able to find it. But that in itself is just like a cool thing to listen to because it kind of brings back memories of the game. And then it's kind of, I was listening to it like just recently. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this is tied to this chapter, and then you want to go back and play that part of the chapter. And so the controls itself, it keeps you guessing. So there are like familiar things, but it's kind of like this, they're always changing. Like, there's different ways you can swipe. There's taps, drags. There's like draw to reveal, piecing together puzzles, scrubbing back and forth, like, the brushing your teeth scene. And the controls are kind of there to be explored. There might be like little arrow prompts to proceed and stuff, but there's sort of very minimal hand holding, which I think, I think is good for this type of game. So there's no way to lose in the game per se, but there are some bits where it's like you stop and you kind of got to look around and think, okay, well, where should I logically touch next? And one of the little bits I got slightly stumped at first is where you're swapping out your items for the items that are there, like when you're doing the moving in. And at first I was like, there's not enough spaces, and I realized, oh, hang on, this is like when you actually move in and you can actually choose what you replace with what. And I was trying to be like, do I be really aggressive with it and just like throw all of my stuff up there and take all of his stuff away? Or do I, what do I actually swap it out for? And I did some funny things, like in the kitchen, I swapped out like the cooker for like something random, just
get rid of the cooker, put a spice jar in.
Yeah, just stuff like that. It doesn't really affect, it's not like a choose your own adventure. It doesn't affect anything, but just that sort of stuff is just kind of like an actual life, just simple life choices that you come across, and they've just put it into game form.
Another scene that really touched me was like the fact, I guess this is a little bit of spoilers, but after the fight where you've got to sort of piece back together the drawing of them hugging, and the pieces just keep on floating away.
Yeah.
And that's just representing like they can't keep it together, they can't stay together.
Back together. Yeah. Yep, and they don't perfectly align.
Yeah.
Because there's that other one where the actual puzzle pieces don't fit.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is so good. Oh, like, again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm just gonna like touch on it. What about the bit of letting go? Yeah. How good was that? I was just like, just the use of time and the use of just like not taking action. Oh, that was excellent. I guess just wrap it up with some additional thoughts. I think, even though, as you said, it's got that shorter time frame, you can complete it in one sitting, but you definitely need to be dedicated to it because it is like an immersive experience. And I don't think it overstays its welcome. I wouldn't really want it to be any longer. I think it does tell the complete story, and it has enough in it visually, or with the audio and all that sort of stuff for you to want to revisit sections. And, I just sort of appreciate it as an overall experience, and I certainly think it justifies the $4.49 price tag. Yeah, but it was cool. Yeah, Australian studio. They're definitely getting the accolades for it, and the recognition they deserve.
It was their first game, too.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Yeah,
as the studio.
Okay, well, that actually brings us to the end of episode 66 of Apple Slice Podcast.
Oh yeah.
So, if you want to follow Apple Slice, we are on social media with Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and please search in your player and subscribe if you haven't already. If you're using the Apple Podcasts app, leaving a review would be stupendous. And our website, appleslice.com.au, I post all the notes and episode links and everything there as well. We are also part of Ozcast Network, which, of course, I mention with every episode. So please go to auscastnetwork.com to find us and plenty of other great podcasts. But to give yourself a shameless plug, Drew, the House of Mario, where can we find you? What network are you part of? Give us the lowdown.
Yep, so you can find the House of Mario, a Nintendo podcast, over on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, whatever takes an RSS feed. We're probably there. If not, look somewhere where we are. We're a part of the 8-Bit Collective. We've got 10 podcasts, all passionate like Simon and I are about creating awesome podcasts. We started up last year, and this is our second year all together, and we're looking to push into 2019 with a big positive bang, whatever that means.
Well, actually, speaking of accolades, you did recently get an award.
We did. I was listening to our friends over on Dash Culture, like, oh yeah, the House of Mario, an award-winning podcast. I'm like, oh, that has a nice ring to it.
It's not a lie, like it's true.
No, it's not a lie at all. We did win an award, the podcast award. We took out the podcast award over at the Dash Awards late last year, which was. It meant a lot to my co-host Bryce and I. It really did.
I voted for you. So
oh, thank you very much.
I'm glad to see that it worked.
Yeah, you might have been the only one who voted and no one else voted. That might be how it worked. I don't know.
I think you can go around and tell everyone that you have a 120-star rating.
Actually, you mentioned that today. I absolutely love that. I'm going to steal that from you because I'm actually looking to revamp a bit of the artwork and the description and stuff. I think
nice.
That is awesome.
I guess on a personal note, because you and I use Twitter quite regularly, what is your personal Twitter handle if anyone wants to follow you there?
You can find me at iDrewby. That's IDREWBY. Post a lot of stuff about the podcast and gaming and maybe just other stuff I'm interested in. It's just, yeah. It
just sort of seems to be that's where a lot of the conversations are happening as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I'll post if you go to a website, actually in the show notes of this episode, I'll post a link to the House of Mario Discord as well, because they definitely have a passionate community of Nintendo gamers there talking about all sorts of stuff.
Yep, shout out to our Discord community. We love you all. Hope some people join us and have some fun.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I am also at Precise Path on Twitter. This is the end of Apple Slice, and thank you, Drew, coming on. It's been good because I've been waiting for the moment. I'm like, okay, when you are involved in Apple to a degree, but when is the most appropriate? And then it just kind of culminated to this part where I was like, okay, let's just cover some gaming stuff. So it's been good to kind of sink our teeth into it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I've learned some things too, like having the all the Apple sales now. I hadn't heard that before you actually mentioned it, so it was good to get involved in that.
It's a very educational experience. So sadly we have to end this experience right here, and I hope to catch you again in the near future in podcast form. Hint, hint.
Wink, wink.
Yes.
Nudge, nudge. That's at you, audience.
When I say this, I'm being very serious.
Yes.
It all makes sense later. A little
bit, yeah.
Forget I sound like a complete idiot right now. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I need a beer. Thanks very much, Drew, and I'll catch you then.
Will do. My pleasure.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.